Her Father's Daughter Part 3 by Gene Stratton-Porter. Chapter 32. How the Wasp Built Her Nest. The following weeks were very happy for Linda. When the cast was removed from Donald's foot and it was found that a year or two of care would put him even on the athletic fields and the dancing floor again, she was greatly relieved. She lacked words in which to express her joy that Marian was rapidly coming into happiness. She was so very busy with her schoolwork, with doing all she could to help Donald with his, with her Jane Meredith articles, with hunting and working out material for her book, that she never had many minutes at a time for introspection. When she did have a few, she sometimes pondered deeply as to whether Marian had been altogether sincere in the last letter she had written her in their correspondence. But she was so delighted in the outcome that if she did at times have the same doubt in a fleeting form that had not been in the least fleeting with Peter Morrison, she dismissed it as rapidly as possible. When things were so very good as they were at that time, why try to improve them? One evening as she came from school, thinking that she would take Katie for a short run in the Bearcat before dinner, she noticed a red head prominent in the front yard as she neared home. When she turned in at the front walk and crossed the lawn, she would have been willing to wager quite a sum that Katie had been crying. "Why, old dear," said Linda, putting her arms around her, "if anything has gone wrong with you, I will certainly take to the warpath and stand her. I can't even imagine what could be troubling you." Linda lowered her voice. "Nothing has come up about Oka, say I?" Katie shook her head. "I thought not," said Linda. "Judge Whiting promised me that what use he made of that should be man's business and exploited wholly for the sake of California and her people. He said we shouldn't be involved. I haven't been worried about it even, although I am willing to go upon the stand and tell the whole story if it will be any help toward putting right what is at present a great wrong to California." "Yes, so would I," said Katie. "I'm not worrying myself about the little baste any more than I would if it had been a mad dog foaming up that cliff at ye." "Then what is it?" asked Linda. "Tell me this minute." "I don't know what in the world you're going to think," said Katie. "I don't know what in the world you're going to do." Her face was so distressed that Linda's nimble brain flew to a conclusion. She tightened her arm across Katie's shoulder. "By Jove, Katie," she said breathlessly. "Is Eileen in the house?" Katie nodded. "Has she been to see John and made things right with him?" Katie nodded again. "He's in there with her waiting for ye," she said. It was a stunned Linda who slowly dropped her arm, stood erect, and lifted her head very high. She thought intently. "You don't mean to tell me," she said, "that you have been crying over her?" Katie held out both hands. "Linda," she said, "she always was such a pretty thing, and her ma didn't raise her to have the sense of a peewee. If your pa had been let take her outdoors and grow her in the sun and the air, she would have been bigger and broader, and there would have been the truth of God's sunshine and the glory of his rain about her. You know, Linda, that she didn't ever have a common decent chance. It was curls that couldn't be shook out, and a nose that dasn't be sunburned, and shoes that mustn't be scuffed, and a dress that shouldn't be mussed, from the day she was born. You couldn't just honest say she had ever had a fair chance now, could ye?" "No," said Linda conclusively. "No, Catherine O'Donovan, you could not. But what are we up against? Does she want to come back? Does she want to stay here again?" "I think she would like to," said Katie. "You go in and see her for yourself, Lambie, before ye come to any decision." "You don't mean," said Linda in a marveling tone, "that she has been homesick, that she has come back to us because she would like to be with us again?" "You go and see her for yourself. And if you don't say she is the worst beat out and the tiredest mortal that ye have ever seen, you'll be surprisin' me. My God, Linda, they ain't nothing in being rich if it can do to a girl what has been done to Eileen." "Oh well," said Linda impatiently, Don't condemn all money because Eileen has not found happiness with it. The trouble has been that Eileen's only chance to be rich came to her through the wrong kind of people. Well, will ye just tell me then, said Katy, how it happened that Eileen's ma was a sister to that great beef of a man, which same is hard on self-respectin' beef. Pork would come nearer. Yes, said Linda, I'll tell you. Eileen's mother had a big streak of the same coarseness and the same vulgarity in her nature, or she could not have reared Eileen as she did. She probably had been sent to school and had better advantages. Then the boy threw a designing mother of her own. Her first husband must have been a man who greatly refined and educated her. We can't ever get away from the fact that Daddy believed in her and loved her. Yes, said Katy, but he was a fooled man. She wasn't what we thought she was. Many's the time I've stood injustice about the accounts and household management because I wouldn't be waking him up to what he was bound to for life. That doesn't help us, said Linda. I must go in and face them. She handed her books to Katy and went into the living room. She concentrated on John Gilman first, and a wee qualm of disgust crept through her soul when she saw that after weeks of suffering, he was once more ready to devote himself to Eileen. Linda marveled at the power a woman could hold over a man that would force him to compromise with his intellect, his education, and environment. Then she turned her attention to Eileen, and the shock she received was informing. She studied her an instant incredulously, then she went to her and held out her hand. How do you do, she said as cordially as was possible to her. This is unexpected. Her mind was working rapidly, yet she could not recall ever having seen a woman quite so beautiful as Eileen. She was very certain that the color on her cheeks was ebbing and rising with excitement. It was no longer so deep as to be stationary. She was very certain that her eyes had not been darkened as to lids or waxed as to lashes. Her hair was beautifully dressed in sweeping waves with scarcely any artificial work upon it. Her dress was extremely tasteful and very expensive. There was no simper on her lips, nothing superficial. She was only a tired, homesick girl. As Linda looked at her, she understood why Katy had cried. Over her, she felt tears beginning to rise in her own heart. She put both arms protectingly around Eileen. Why, you poor little thing, she said wonderingly, was it so damn bad as all that? Eileen stood straight. She held herself rigidly. She merely nodded. Then after a second, she said, worse than anything you could imagine, Linda. Being rich with people who have grown rich by accident is a dreadful experience. So I have always imagined, said Linda. And then in her usual downright way she asked, why did you come, Eileen? Is there anything you wanted of me? Eileen hesitated. It was not in Linda's heart to be mean. Homesick little sister. She asked lightly, do you want to come here while you're getting ready to make a home for John? Is that it? Then Eileen swayed forward suddenly, buried her face in Linda's breast, and for the first time in her life Linda saw and heard her cry, not from selfishness, not from anger, not from greed, but as an ordinary human being cries when the heart is so full that nature relieves itself with tears. Linda closed her arms around her and smiled over her head at John Gilman. Finish all of it before you stop, she advised. It's all right, you come straight home. You didn't leave me any word, and I didn't know what to do with your things, but I couldn't feel that you would want to give up such beautiful things that you had so enjoyed. We had planned for Marion to spend her summer vacation here, so I put her things in your suite, and I had moved mine into the guest room, but I have had my room done over and the guest room things are in there, and every scrap of yours is carefully put away. If that will do, you are perfectly welcome to it. Eileen wiped her eyes. Anything, she sobbed. I'd rather have Katie's room than be shamed and humiliated and hurt any further. Linda, I would almost like you to know my Aunt Callie, because you will never understand about her if you don't. Her favorite pastime was to tell everyone we met how much the things I wore cost her. Linda released Eileen with a slight shake. Cheer up, she said. We'll all have a gorgeous time together. I haven't the slightest ambition to know more than that about your Aunt Callie. If my brain really had been acting properly, I would never have dismantled your room. I would have known that you could not endure her and that you would come home just as you should. It's all right, John. Make yourself comfortable. I don't know what Katie has for dinner, but she can always find enough for an extra. Couple. Come, Eileen, I'll help you to settle. Where is your luggage? I brought back, Linda, just what I have on, said Eileen. I will begin again where I left off. I realize that I am not entitled to anything further from the Strong estate, but Uncle was so unhappy and John says it's all right, really. I am the only blood heir to all they have. I might as well take a comfortable allowance from it. I am to go to see them a few days of every month. I can endure that when I know I have John and you to come back to. When Eileen had been installed in Linda's old room, Linda went down to the kitchen, shut the door behind her, and leaning against it, laid her hand over her mouth to suppress a low laugh. Katie, she said, I've been and gone and done it. I've put the perfect lady in my old room. That will be a test of her sincerity, even dainty and pretty as it is since it's been done over. If she is sincere enough to spend the summer getting ready to marry John Gilman, why, that is all right, old girl. We can stand it, can't we? Yes, said Katie. It's one of them infernal nuisances, but we can stand it. I'm thinking from the looks of John Gilman and his manner of spaking that it ain't going to be but a very short time that he'll be waitin'. Katie, said Linda, isn't this the most entertaining world? Doesn't it produce the most lightning-like changes? And don't the most unexpected things happen? Sort of dazes me. I had planned to take a little run with you and the cat. Since we are having no, I mustn't say guests since John and Eileen have come home. I'll have to give up that plan until after dinner, and then we'll go and take counsel with our souls and see if we can figure out how we are going to solve this equation. And if you don't know what an equation is, old dear heart, it's me with the war club and you with the shillelagh and Eileen between us. And be damned to us. If we can't make an average, ordinary, decent human being out of her. Pin an apron on her in the morning, Katie, and hand her a dustcloth and tell her to industrialize. We will help her with her trousseau, but she shall help us with the work. You know, Lambie, whispered Katie suddenly, this is a burnin' shame. The one thing I didn't think about is that book of yours. What about it? I scarcely know, said Linda. It's difficult to say. Of course we can't carry out the plans we had made to work here exactly as we had intended, with Eileen in the house preparing to be married. But she tells me that her uncle has made her a generous allowance, so probably it's environment and love she is needing much more than help. It is barely possible, Katie, that after I have watched her a few days, if I decide she is in genuine, sincere, heart-whole earnest, I might introduce her and John to my friend, Jane. It is probable that if I did, Eileen would not. Expect me to help her, and at the same time, she wouldn't feel that I was acting indifferently because I did not. We'll wait a while, Katie, and see whether we skid before we put on the chains. What about Marion? Inquired Katie. I don't know, said Linda thoughtfully. If Marion is big enough to come here and spend the summer under the same roof with Eileen and John Gilman and have a really restful, enjoyable time out of it, she is bigger than I am. Come up to the garret. I think Eileen has brought no more with her than she took away. We'll bring her trunk down, put it in her room, and lay the keys on top. Don't begin by treating her as a visitor. Treat her as if she were truly my sister. Tell her what you want and how you want it, exactly as you tell me and as I tell you. If you see even a suspicion of any of the former objectionable tendencies popping up, let's check them quick and hard, Katie. For a week, Linda watched Eileen closely. At the end of that time, she was sincere in her conviction that Eileen had been severely chastened. When she came in contact with Peter Morrison or any other man they met, she was not immediately artificial. She had learned to be as natural with men as with other women. There were no pretty postures, no softened vocal modulations, no childish nonsense on subjects upon which the average child of these days displays the knowledge of the past generation grandmother. When they visited Peter Morrison's house, it was easy to see that Eileen was interested, more interested than any of them ever before had seen her in any subject outside of clothing and jewels. Her conduct in the strong home had been irreproachable. She had cared for her own room, quietly undertaken the duties of dusting and arranging the rooms and cutting and bringing in flowers. She had gone to the kitchen and wiped dishes and asked to be taught how to cook things of which John was particularly fond. She had been reasonable in the amount of time she had spent on her shopping and had repeatedly gone to Linda and shown interest in her concerns. The result was that Linda at once displayed the same interest in anything pertaining to Eileen. One afternoon, Linda came home unusually early. She called for Eileen, told her to tie on her sunshade and be ready for a short ride. Almost immediately, she brought around the Bearcat, and when they were seated side by side, headed it toward the canyon. She stopped at the usual resting place, and together she and Eileen walked down the light dappled roadbed. She pointed out things to Eileen, telling her what they were, to what uses they could be put, while at the same time narrowly watching her. To her amazement, she found that Eileen was interested, that she was noticing things for herself, asking what they were. She wanted to know the names of the singing birds. When a big bird trailed a waiting shadow in front of her, Linda explained how she might distinguish an eagle from a hawk from a vulture, a seabird from those of the land. When they reached the bridge, Linda climbed down the embankment to gather cress. She was moved to protest when Eileen followed and without saying the word began to assist her, but she restrained herself, for it suddenly occurred to her that it would be an excellent thing for Eileen to think more of what she was doing and why she was doing it than about whether she would wet her feet or muddy her fingers. So the protest became an explanation that it was rather late for cress. The leaves toughened when it bloomed and were too peppery. The only way it could be used agreeably was to work along the edges and select the small tender shoots that had not yet matured to the flowering point. When they had an armload, they would back to the car, and without any explanation, Linda drove into Los Angeles and stopped at the residence of Judge Whiting, not telling Eileen where she was. "Friends of mine," said Linda lightly as she stepped from the car. "Fond of cress salad with their dinner. They prepare it after the Jane Meredith recipe, to which you called my attention, in Everybody's Home last winter. Come along with me." Eileen stepped from the car and followed. Linda led the way round the sidewalk to where her quick ear had located voices on the side lawn. She stopped at the kitchen door, handed in the cress, exchanged a few laughing words with the cook, and then presented herself at the door of the summer house. Inside, his books and papers spread over a work table, sat Donald Whiting. One side of him his mother was busy darning his socks. On the other, his sister Louise was working with embroidery silk and small squares of gaily colored linen. Linda entered with exactly the same self-possession that characterized her at home. She shook hands with Mrs. Whiting, Mary Louise, and Donald, and then she said quietly, "Eileen and I were gathering cress, and we stopped to leave you some for your dinner." With this explanation, she introduced Eileen to Mrs. Whiting. Mary Louise immediately sprang up and recalled their meeting at Riverside. Donald remembered a meeting he did not mention. It was only a few minutes until Linda was seated beside Donald, interesting herself in his lessons. Eileen begged to be shown the pretty handkerchiefs that Mary Louise was making. An hour later, Linda refused an invitation to dinner because Katie would be expecting them. When she arose to go, Eileen was carrying the small square of blue-green linen. Carefully pinned to it was a patch of white with a spray of delicate flowers outlined upon it and a skein of pink silk thread. She had been initiated into the thrillingly absorbing feminine accomplishment of making sport handkerchiefs. When they left, Eileen was included naturally, casually, spontaneously, in their invitation to Linda to run in any time she would. Mary Louise had said she would ride out with Donald in a few days and see how the handkerchiefs were coming on, and more instruction and different stitches and patterns were necessary. She would love to teach them. So Linda realized that Mary Louise had been told about the trousseau. She knew, even lacking as she was in feminine sophistication, that there were two open roads to the heart of a woman. One is a wedding and the other is a baby. The lure of either is irresistible. As the Bearcat glided back to Lilac Valley, Eileen sat silent. For 10 years she had coveted the entree to the Whiting home, perhaps more than any other in the city. Merely by being simple and natural, by living her life as life presented itself each day, Linda, with no effort whatever, had made possible to Eileen the thing she so deeply craved. Eileen was learning a new lesson each day, some days, many of them, but none was more amazing, more simple, or struck deeper into her awakened consciousness. As she gazed with far-seeing eye on the blue walls of the valley, Eileen was taking a mental inventory of her former self. One by one she was arraigning all the old tricks she had used in her trade of getting on in the world. One by one she was discarding them in favor of honesty, unaffectedness, and wholesome enjoyment. Because of these things, Linda came home the next afternoon and left a bundle on Eileen's bed before she made her way to her own room to busy herself with the headpiece for Peter's latest article. She had taken down the wasp picture and, while she had not destroyed it, she had turned the key of a very substantial lock upon it. She was hard at work when she heard steps on the stairs. When Eileen entered, Linda smiled quizzically and then broke into an unaffected ejaculation. "Ripping!" she cried. "Why, Eileen, you're perfectly topping!" Eileen's face flamed with delight. She was a challenging little figure. None of them was accustomed to her when she represented anything more substantial than curls and ruffles. Linda reached for the telephone, called Gilman, and asked him if he could go to the beach for supper that evening. He immediately replied that he would. Then she called Peter Morrison and asked him the same question, and when Peter answered affirmatively, she told him to bring his car. Then she hastily put on her own field clothes and ran to the kitchen to fill the lunchbox. To Katie's delight, Linda told her there would be room for her and that she needed her. It was evening and the sun was moving slowly toward the horizon when they stopped the cars and went down on the white sands of Santa Monica Bay. Eileen had been complimented until she was in a glow of delight. She did not notice that in piling things out of the car for their beach supper, Linda had handed her a shovel and the blackened iron legs of a broiler. Everyone was loaded promiscuously as they took up their march down to as near the water's edge as the sands were dry. Peter and John gathered driftwood. Linda improvised 2 cooking places, one behind a rock for herself, the other under the little outdoor stove for Katie. Eileen was instructed as to how to set up the beach table, spread the blankets beside it, and place the food upon it. While Katie made coffee and toasted biscuit, Linda was busy introducing her party to brigand beefsteak upon 4 long steel skewers. The day had been warm. The light salt breeze from the sea was like a benediction. Friendly gulls gathered on the white sands around them. Cunning little sea chickens worked in accord with the tide. When the waves advanced, they rose above them on wing. When they retreated, they scampered over the wet sand, hunting any small particles of food that might have been carried in. Out over the water, big brown pelicans went slowly fanning homeward, and white sea swallows drew wonderful pictures on the blue night sky with the tips of their wings. For a few minutes at the reddest point of its setting, the sun painted a marvelous picture in a bank of white clouds. These piled up like a great rosy castle, and down the sky roadway before it came a long procession of armored knights, red in the sunglow, and riding huge red horses. Then the colors mixed and faded, and a long red bridge for a short time spanned the water, ending at their feet. The gulls hunted the last scrap thrown them and went home. The swallows sought their high cliffs. The insidiously alluring perfume of sand, verbena, rose like altar incense around them. Gilman spread a blanket, piled the beach fire higher, and sitting beside Eileen, he drew her head to his shoulder and put his arm around her. Possibly he could have been happier in a careless way if he had never suffered. It is very probable that the poignant depth of exquisite happiness he felt in that hour never would have come to him had he not lost Eileen and found her again so much more worth loving. Linda wandered down the beach until she reached the lighthouse rocks. She climbed on a high one and sat watching the sea as it sprayed just below. Peter Morrison followed her. "May I come up?" he asked. "Surely," said Linda. "This belongs to the Lord, it isn't mine." So Peter climbed up and sat beside her. "How did the landscape appeal to you when you left the campfire?" inquired Linda. "I should think the night cry might very well be 8 o'clock and all's well." Answered Peter. "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world." Linda put it in the form of a question. "It seems to be for John and Eileen," said Peter. "It is for a number of people," said Linda. "I had a letter from Marian today. I had written her to ask if she would come to us for the summer, in spite of the change in our plans. But Mr. Snow has made some plans of his own. He is a very astute individual. He wanted Marian to marry him at once, and she would not. So he took her for a short visit to see his daughter at her grandmother's home in the northern part of the state. Marian fell deeply in love with his little girl, and of course those people found Marian charming, just as right-minded people would find her. When she saw how the little girl missed her father and how difficult it was for him to leave her, and when she saw how she would be loved and appreciated in that fine family, she changed her mind. "Peter, we are going to be invited to San Francisco to see them married very shortly. Are you glad or sorry?" "I am very glad," said Peter heartily. "I make no concealment of my admiration for Miss Thorne, but I am very glad indeed that it is not her head that is to complete the decoration when you start the iris marching down my creek banks." "Well, that's all right," said Linda. "Of course you should have something to say about whose head finished that picture. I can't contract to do more than set the iris. The thing about this I dread is that Marian and Eugene are going to live in San Francisco, and I did so want her to make her home in Lilac Valley." "That's too bad," said Peter sympathetically. "I know how you appreciate her, how deeply you love her. Do you think the valley will ever be right for you without her, Linda?" "It will have to be," said Linda. "I've had to go on without father, you know. If greater happiness seems to be in store for Marian in San Francisco, all I can do is to efface myself and say amen. When the world is all right for Marian, it is about as near all right as it can be for me." And did you ever see much more sincerely and clearly contented people than John and Eileen are at the present minute?" Peter looked at Linda whimsically. He lowered his voice as if a sea urchin might hear and tattle. "What did you do about the wasp, Linda?" he whispered. "I delicately erased the stinger, fluffed up a ruffle, and put the sketch under lock and key. I should have started a fire with it, but I couldn't quite bring myself to let it go yet." "Is she going to hold out?" asked Peter. "She'll hold out or get her neck wrung," said Linda. "I truly think she has been redeemed. She has been born again. She has a new heart and a new soul and a new impulse and a right conception of life. Why, Peter, she has even got a new body. Her face is not the same." "She is much handsomer," said Peter. "Isn't she?" cried Linda enthusiastically. "And doesn't having a soul and doesn't thinking about essential things make the most remarkable difference in her? It is worth going through a fiery furnace to come out new like that. I called her a bednego the other day, but she didn't know what I meant." Then they sat silent and watched the sea for a long time. By and by the night air grew chill. Peter slipped from the rock and went up the beach and came back. With an Indian blanket. He put it very carefully around Linda's shoulders, and when he went to resume his seat beside her, he found one of her arms stretching it with a blanket corner for him. So he sat down beside her and drew the corner over his shoulder, and because his right arm was very much in his way, and it would have been very disagreeable if Linda had slipped from the rock and fallen into the cold, salt, unsympathetic Pacific at 9 o'clock at night, merely to dispose of the arm comfortably and to ensure her security, Peter put it around Linda and drew her security. Peter put it around Linda and drew her up beside him, very close. Linda did not seem to notice. She sat quietly looking at the Pacific and thinking her own thoughts. When the fog became damp and chill, she said they must be going, and so they went back to their cars and drove home through the sheer wonder of the moonlight, through the perfume of the orange orchards, hearing the night song of the mocking birds. Chapter 33. The Lady of the Iris. A few days later, Linda and Peter went to San Francisco and helped celebrate the marriage of Marion and Eugene Snow. They left Marion in a home carefully designed to ensure every comfort and convenience she ever had planned, furnished in accordance with her desires. Both Linda and Peter were charmed with little Deborah Snow. She was a beautiful and an appealing child. "It seems to me," said Linda on the train going home, "that Marion will get more out of life. She will love deeper, she will work harder, she will climb higher in her profession than she would have done if she had married John. It is difficult sometimes when things are happening to realize that they are for the best, but I really believe this thing has been for the level best. I think Marion is going to be a bigger woman in San Francisco than she ever would have been in Lilac Valley. With that thought I must reconcile myself." "And what about John?" asked Peter. "Is he going to be a bigger man with Eileen than he would have been with Marion?" "No," said Linda, "he is not. He didn't do right and he'll have penalty to pay. Eileen is developing into a lovable and truly beautiful woman, but she has not the intellect, nor the education, nor the impulse to stimulate a man's mental processes and make him outdo himself the way Marion will. John will probably never know it, but he will have to do his own stimulating. He will have to vision life for himself. He will have to find his high hill and climb it with Eileen riding securely on his shoulders. It isn't really the pleasantest thing in the world. It isn't truly the thing I wanted to do this summer helping them out. But it has seemed to be the work at hand, the thing Daddy probably would have wanted me to do. So it's up to me to do all I can for them, just as I did all I could for Donald. One thing I shall always be delighted about With my own ears, I heard the pronouncement Donald had the Jap beaten. He was at the head of his class before Okasaye was eliminated. The Jap knew it. His only chance lay in getting rid of his rival. Donald can take the excellent record he has made in this race to start on this fall when he commences another battle against some other man's brain for top honors in his college. Will he start with the idea that he wants to be an honor man? Linda laughed outright. I think, she said, his idea was that if he were one of 50 or 100 leading men it would be sufficient, but I insisted that if he wanted to be first with me, he would have to be first in his schoolwork. I see, said Peter. Linda, have you definitely decided that when you come to your homemaking hour, Donald is the man with whom you want to spend the remainder of your life? Oh, good gracious, said Linda. Who's talking about homes and spending? The remainder of lives? Donald and I are school friends, and we are good companions. You're as bad as Eileen. She's always trying to suggest things that nobody else ever thought of, and now Katie's beginning it too. Sapheads all, said Peter. Well, allow me to congratulate you on having given Donald his spurs. I think it's a very fine thing for him to start to college with the honor idea in his head. What about your Saturday excursions? They have died an unnatural death, said Linda. Don and I fought for them, but the judge and Mrs. Whiting and Mary Louise were terrified for fear a bone might slip in Don's foot or some revengeful friend or relative of Okasaye lie in wait for us. They won't hear of our going any more. I go every Saturday and take Donald for a very careful drive over a smooth road with the Bearcat cursing our rate of speed all the way. All the fun spoils for all three of us. Think I would be any good as a substitute when it comes to field work? Inquired Peter casually. I have looked at your desert garden so much I would know a cotillon if I saw it. I believe I could learn. You wouldn't have time to bother, objected Linda. You're a man, with a man's business to transact in the world. You have to hustle and earn money to pay for the bridge and changing the brook. But I had money to pay for the brook and the bridge before I agreed to them, said Peter. Well then, said Linda, you should begin to hunt old mahogany and rugs. I hadn't intended to, said Peter. If they are to be old, I won't have to do more than to ship them. In storage in Virginia there are some very wonderful old mahogany and rosewood and rugs and bric-a-brac enough to furnish the house I am building. The stuff belonged to a little old aunt of mine who left it to me in her will, and it was with those things in mind that I began my house. The plans and finishing will fit that furniture beautifully. Why, you lucky individual, said Linda. Nowhere in the world is there more beautiful furniture than in some of those old homes in Virginia. There are old Flemish and Dutch and British and Italian pieces that came into this country on early sailing vessels for the aristocrats. You don't mean that kind of stuff, do you, Peter? That is precisely the kind of stuff I do mean, answered Peter. Why, Peter, if you have furniture like that, cried Linda, then all you need is Mary Louise. Linda, said Peter soberly, you are trespassing on delicate ground again. You selected one wife for me, and your plan didn't work. When that furniture arrives, and is installed, I'll set about inducing the lady of my dreams to come and occupy my dream house in my own way. I never did give you that job. It was merely assumed on your part. So it was, said Linda. But you know I could set that iris and run that brook with more enthusiasm if I knew the lady who was to walk beside it. You do, said Peter. You know her better than anyone else, even better than I. Put that in your mental pipe and smoke it. Saints preserve us, cried Linda. I believe the man is planning to take Katie away from me. Not from you, said Peter. With you. Let me know about it before you do it, said Linda with a careless laugh. That's what I'm doing right now, said Peter. And I'm going to school, said Linda. Of course, said Peter. But that won't last forever. Linda entered enthusiastically upon the triple task of getting Donald in a proper frame of mind to start to college with the ambition to do good work, of marrying off Eileen and John Gilman, and of giving her best brain and heart to Jane Meredith. When the time came, Donald was ready to enter college comfortable and happy, willing to wait and see what life had in store for him as he lived it. When she was sure of Eileen past any reasonable doubt, Linda took her and John to her workroom one evening and showed them her book contract and the materials she had ready, and gave them the best idea she could of what yet remained to be done. She was not prepared for their wholehearted praise, for their delight and appreciation. Alone, they took counsel as to how they could best help her, and decided that to be married at once and take a long trip abroad would be the best way. That would leave Linda to work in quiet and with no interruption to distract her attention. They could make their home arrangements when they returned. When they had gone, Linda worked persistently, but her book was not completed, and the publishers were hurrying her when the fall term of school opened. By the time the final chapter with its exquisite illustration had been sent in, the first ones were coming back in proof, and with the proof came the materialized form of Linda's design for her cover, and there was no Marian to consult about it. Linda worked until she was confused, then she piled the material in the Bearcat and headed up Lilac Valley. As she came around the Moyngron curve and turned from the public road, she saw that for the first time she might cross her bridge. It was waiting for her. She heard the rejoicing of the water as it fell from stone to stone, where it dipped under the road, and as she swung across the bridge, she saw that she might drive over the completed road which had been finished in her weeks of absence. The windows told another story. Peter's furniture had come, and he had been placing it without telling her. She found the front door standing wide open, so she walked in. With her bundle on her arm, she made her way to Peter's workroom. When he looked up and saw her standing in his door, he sprang to his feet and came to meet her. "Peter," she said, "I've taken on more work than I can possibly finish on time, and I'm the lonesomest person in California today." "I doubt that," said Peter gravely. "If you are any lonesomer than I am, you must prove it." "I have proved it," said Linda quietly. "If you had been as lonesome as I am, you would have come to me. As it is, I have come to you." "I see," said Peter rather breathlessly. "What have you there, Linda? Why did you come?" "I came for 2 reasons," said Linda. "I want to ask you about this stuff. Several times this summer, you have heard talk about Jane Meredith and the Everybody's Home articles. Ever read any of them, Peter?" "Yes," said Peter. "I read all of them. Interested in home stuff these days myself." "Well," said Linda, dumping her armload before Peter, "there's the proof, and there's the illustration, and there's the cover design for a book to be made from that stuff. Peter, make your best boy and say pleased to meet you to Jane Meredith." Peter secured both of Linda's hands and held them. First he looked at her, then he looked at the material she had piled down in front of him. "Never again," said Peter in a small voice, "will I credit myself with any deep discernment, any keen penetration. How I could have read that matter and looked at those pictures and not seen you in and through and over them is a thing I can't imagine. It's great, Linda, absolutely great. Of course I will help you any way in the world I can. And what else was it you wanted? You said 2 things." "Oh, the other doesn't amount to much," said Linda. I only wanted the comfort of knowing whether, as soon as I graduate, I may take Katie and come home, Peter." From previous experience with Linda, Peter had learned that a girl reared by men is not as other women. He had supposed the other thing concerning which she had wanted to appeal to him was on par with her desire for sympathy and help concerning her book. At her question, with her eyes frankly meeting his, Peter for an instant felt light-headed. He almost dodged. He was so sweepingly taken unawares. Linda was waiting and his brain was not working. He tried to smile, but he knew she would not recognize as natural the expression of that whirling moment. She saw his hesitation. "Of course, if you don't want us," Peter found his voice promptly. Only his God knew how much he wanted Linda, but there were conditions that a man of Peter's soul fiber could not endure. More than life he wanted her, but he did not want her asleep. He did not want to risk her awakening to a spoiled life and disappointed hopes. "But you remember that I told you coming home from San Francisco that you knew the Lady of my Iris better than anyone else, and that I was planning to take Katie not from you but with you." "Of course I remember," said Linda. "That is why, when Marian and Eileen and Donald and all my world went past and left me standing desolate and my work piled up until I couldn't see my way, I just started right out to ask you if you would help me with the proof. Of course I knew you would be glad to do that, and I thought if you really meant in your heart that I was the one to complete your iris procession, it would be a comfort to me during the hard work and the lonesome days to have it put in 2-syllable English." Marian said that was the only real way, and Marian is eminently correct. "You will have to give me an ordinary lifetime, Linda, in which to try to make you understand exactly what this means to me. Perhaps I'll even have to invent new words in which to express myself." "Oh, that's all right," said Linda. "It means a lot to me, too. I can't tell you how much I think of you. That first day, as soon as I put down the cotyledon safely and tucked in my blouse, I would have put my hand in yours and started around the world, if you had asked me to. I have the very highest esteem for you, Peter." "Esteem, yes," said Peter slowly. "But Linda girl, isn't the sort of alliance I am asking you to enter with me usually based on something a good bit stronger than esteem?" "Yes, I think it is," said Linda. "But you needn't worry. I only wanted the comfort of knowing that I was not utterly alone again, save for Katie. I'll stick to my book and to my fight for senior honors all right." Peter was blinking his eyes and fighting to breathe evenly. When he could speak, he said as smoothly as possible, "Of course, Linda. I'll do your proof for you, and you may put all your time on class honors. It merely occurred to me to wonder whether you realize the full and ultimate significance of what we are saying." "Exactly what it means to me and to you." "Possibly not, Peter," said Linda, smiling on him with utter confidence. "Everyone says I'm my father's daughter, and father didn't live to coach me on being your iris decoration as a woman would. But, Peter, when the time comes, I have every confidence in your ability to teach me what you would like me to know yourself. Don't you agree with me, Peter?" Making an effort to control himself, Peter gathered up the material Linda had brought, and taking her arm, he said casually, "I thoroughly agree with you, dear. You are sanely and healthfully and beautifully right. Now let's go and take Katie into our confidence, and then you shall show me your ideas before I begin work on your proof. And after this, instead of you coming to me, I shall always come to you whenever you can spare a minute for me." Linda nodded acquiescence. "Of course, that would be best," she said. "Peter, you are so satisfyingly satisfactory." The end. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey, the characters, and the world they carried with them. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows more timeless books to be shared with listeners around the world. Until next time, thank you for listening.